When a healthcare provider writes a medication order, there are 4 basic kinds of medication orders that are written, and you have to understand the parameters of each one. Probably the most common order written is called a standing order, and this is the majority of the orders that you see in charts. This means you continue it on a regular schedule for the patient until the order is discontinued. The hospital has certain policies, and many of the orders have a kind of a termination date or expiration date. So things like medications, they generally have to indicate how long the patient will be on it, 5 days, 10 days. Controlled substances usually have to be reordered within a certain amount of time, and that can be a policy of the particular facility. When you've got a chart in a nursing facility, there's an order written that usually is going to be standing for however long the policy dictates from that facility. And then when that particular time is up, then the physician who's sort of in charge of the medical care at that facility has to go through and rewrite the order if it's to be continued. One order that we're really familiar with if we watch medical shows on TV is the stat order. You hear them just hollering out orders, and it's this stat and that stat. But that means it's an emergency order, and you basically have to drop whatever you're doing and give that drug immediately. Don't confuse that with a single order, sometimes referred to as a now order. In that case, the healthcare provider will order it and specify, give it now or give it one time. And according to our textbook, your time limit is 1 to 1.5 hours. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make the patient wait 1.5 hours. If they're having pain and there's nothing in their order, and maybe the only thing in their order is some Tylenol, and they have a headache, and you give them some Tylenol, and the Tylenol doesn't touch it, and the headache's getting worse. So you call the physician, and you get a single order for Vicodin or something stronger. You're not going to make that patient wait 1.5 hours to relieve their pain, but that's your time limit. Generally, it's just a one-time order, and it's not going to be repeated. And you want to clarify. You want to say, now, do you want me to order that again, give that to him again, or is this just a one-time order? And the doctor should say, no, just this one time. Call me back if the pain continues. Or they will go ahead and make it a standing order. But if it's a single order or a now order, you want to make sure it's specified, and that just means you just give it to them now, and if you need it again, you call for it. Then common orders are things that are ordered PRN. Say that single order that you gave the patient 6 hours ago helped a lot, and the doctor says, well, I'll go ahead and make it a PRN order in case they have any more pain that Tylenol won't take care of. So they'll write it, Vicodin, 5 milligrams, 325 milligrams, Q4 to 6 hours, PRN for pain. Now, basically, PRN means as needed, and that requires the judgment of the nurse. You're the one who decides from assessing the patient if they need this particular medication. This is also explained in your ATI book on page 12. Now, on page 16, we talk about the Nurse Practice Act. The Nurse Practice Act in your state is what determines the level of responsibility and what kind of authority you're considered to have over the other employees. Like we said before, different levels of nursing are going to have different levels of authority and accountability. The things that an LPN can decide and the certain amount of authority they have is not the same as that of an RN, and what an RN can do and who they can dictate to or give orders to is going, or instructions to, is going to be different than an advanced practice RN who comes in and works as a nurse practitioner on the floor. You are expected to adhere to the Nurse Practice Act of the state in which you're practicing. And so it's a good idea to have a copy of that so that you can refer to it if you have questions about what you can and cannot do in your particular state. Now, the different responsibilities and the ability to work in each state sort of depends on the Nurse Practice Act, and part of that is licensure. 24 states currently have an agreement called a Nurse Licensure Compact. And the last I read, 7 other states were pending. And what this says is that you can practice on your multi-state license in another state. And we have seen a lot of that in these past few months as nurses have left their jobs and gone to areas where there's a lot of COVID-19, and they have been given a lot of leeway to practice even if they don't have a license that covers them in that state. And that's kind of an emergency situation. But if you've got a multi-state license, you can go to any of the other states and practice. However, you still have to work under the Nurse Practice Act of that state that you're in. I can't, I think Illinois is a compact state. So I could go with my Tennessee license, I could go work in Illinois, but I can't do the things that Tennessee says I can do. I have to follow what Illinois says I can do. So it's very important that you keep track of that. And you can look for information on the Nurse Licensure Compact in this link that I've given. And I think eventually we're probably going to see that with the nursing shortage, that we have a state license that works like a driver's license, where we can go from state to state and work as long as we're licensed in one particular state. But there's still going to have to be paperwork. And if you move from your original state to one of your multi-state areas, you're expected to get a license for that state once it's time to renew your license. So, of course, we know that all nurses have legal responsibilities for their actions, and they're, pretty heavy-duty responsibilities. So here is where you can look up the Nurse Practice Act in the state of Tennessee, and it kind of lays out what you can do as an RN or an LPN. For instance, a lot of the confusion comes about for orders on if you can or cannot push medications as an LPN. And the Nurse Practice Act tells the LPN that you can push medications, but you can't push thrombolytics, you can't push pediatric meds, you can't push any IV meds working with an antepartum patient who's pregnant, no prenatal meds. You can only push IV meds on adults weighing over 80 pounds. So some of these little bitty people in the nursing home, you wouldn't be able to. And you can't be the original one to hang blood, but once the blood is hung and checked by, verified by RNs, then you can monitor it and go in and do the vitals every half hour. So it's just important to understand what you can and cannot do according to your Nurse Practice Act. Of course, anytime we give drugs to a patient, we are accepting professional responsibility. And even though there's a healthcare provider and a pharmacist involved, basically the buck stops with us. Very important to know that you've got your 9 rights of drug administration and you're using them.